The scream tore through the suffocating air of LuxPort International Airport like a blade, sleek, luxurious a place where only expensive suits and leather luggage seemed to belong. The first monsoon rain poured onto the runway like a final test before takeoff. Everyone stopped, not because of the schedule, not because of a mechanical issue, but because a small woman, drenched in rain and wearing a janitor's uniform, was standing squarely in front of billionaire Damian Roth's private jet. "Stop, don't get on that plane." Her voice cracked and burned, yet it sliced through the howling wind and the dragging wheels of rolling suitcases. Security rushed forward as if facing a threat, not a trembling woman clutching a thin folder to her chest. Damian, dressed in a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit, turned his head, his sharp gaze landing on Evelyn Chase like she was a stain on the marble floor. Behind him, a line of assistant senior advisors and a few trailing reporters exchanged looks. A young blonde woman sneered. "She looks like she walked straight out of a failed soap opera." Evelyn was dragged off the runway, still yelling, "There's a leak in the pressure chamber. I saw it. Please check it again." No one listened. No one believed her. A rotund man in a red tuxedo clapped mockingly. "Bravo LuxPort's hiring psychic janitors now." Damian said nothing, only signaling for his bodyguard to shut the cabin door. The sleek silver jet roared as its engines came to life, rising above the heavy air that Evelyn had sliced through like a scratch on polished glass. None of the powerful people there knew. No one suspected that her scream, absurd and abrasive as it seemed, was the one warning that might have saved them from their own arrogance. And this story had only just begun. Evelyn was shoved hard against the back wall of the maintenance area, her dark hair plastered to her face from the rain, her uniform streaked with mud and blotches of engine oil. A senior airport manager stormed over his amber-colored tie, askew from rushing, and growled like someone about to sign a termination notice. "Who do you think you are? This is LuxPort, not a soap opera. You're here to mop the floors, not stop a billion-dollar jet." Evelyn didn't respond. Her eyes, dark and deep, like the sky after a storm, remained fixed on the private jet, slowly rolling down the runway, as if still trying to send one last message into the air, vibrating with engine roars. The manager wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone, lifted it, and recorded her. "Congratulations, you just made the blacklist of the entire aviation industry." A young woman in Prada, a freshly hired PR assistant, walked past, sighing to her colleague, "No degree, no connections, no power," and she dares to shout in a terminal full of elites. Far off, a few luxury passengers still glanced back. Others shook their heads in pity, as if Evelyn was the embodiment of failure, a predictable end for someone who dared to breach the lines of class. But Evelyn didn't cry, didn't flinch. She only whispered so soft no one could hear, "I've seen this happen before." Her hand unconsciously clenched the edge of her battered clipboard, the one where she had written countless notes about potential leaks in the maintenance bay. She didn't feel rage anymore. That fire had long since burned out. During interviews where they scoffed at her because she wasn't from MIT, didn't have a legacy name, and wasn't camera pretty, they never knew and never cared to know that behind the cleaning rag was a mind that once touched the prototype designs for next-gen jet engines. But the wind outside still screamed louder than the voice of a janitor. And as they laughed, as they mocked her, as they passed her like a speck of dirt on a marble corridor, they didn't realize they were burying their last chance to avoid the tragedy that was quietly closing in. The thick glass doors slid shut behind Evelyn like a silent verdict. She stood still in the cold maintenance room, fluorescent lights flickering above, casting her small shadow across the stained concrete wall. Outside, the private jet bearing the Roth Global emblem began to accelerate, the wind curling beneath its wheels, singing a heartless refrain. Through the fogged-up window, Evelyn watched every movement, without blinking, without breathing deeply, as if by some miracle, her gaze alone could slow the roaring turbine blades. Inside the VIP cabin, Damian Roth sat, with his laptop open to Asian market charts, completely unfazed by the captain's brief update. His personal assistant poured champagne, while a group of advisors laughed about the crazy janitor incident. One joked she should join the emergency broadcast team with a voice like that. Damian smirked faintly, eyes cold, as if everything was precisely under control. But Evelyn knew the one thing no one could ever truly control was arrogance, standing too close to the edge of catastrophe. A droplet from the ceiling fell straight onto her neck, cold, sharp. Memory returned like a slow, unstoppable flood. She remembered her father, Marcus Chase, the former lead engineer who once designed jet engines for Skytech, only to be removed from the project after refusing to simplify inspection protocols to meet the IPO deadline. Months later, one of those jets crashed. The headlines only ran a single line: technical error yet to be determined. But Evelyn knew, and so did her mother, who hadn't slept through a night in 3 years, that it wasn't a technical error. It was the price of ignoring a quiet but accurate voice. Her fingers tightened around her father's old pen, the only thing left in her pocket that truly mattered. A hairline crack in the pressure chamber, a hiss too sharp, a frequency deviation of a few thousandths. All of it was aligning not on blueprints, not in a lab, but now in the sky above her. And while the world admired the majestic silver jet piercing through dark clouds, only one person, just one, was still whispering in her heart. Please, don't let them realize it too late. Just 11 minutes after the wheels left the runway, the air inside the cabin began to shift. At first, it was barely noticeable, tiny tremors that merely made the champagne ripple inside crystal glasses. But then, like a heartbeat skipping inside the chest of someone who once believed himself invincible, the jet tilted slightly. A dry, abrupt sound came from the tail, too quiet to cause panic, but far too abnormal to ignore. Damian Roth was reviewing a profit report when his glass of champagne tipped and spilled across the table. His assistant stood up quickly, but before she could step forward, the overhead chime rang out, ding ding, followed by the captain's voice, tense and clipped. We are experiencing a minor thermodynamic issue with the engine. The crew is managing the situation. Please fasten your seatbelts immediately. It sounded like an apology from someone too used to pretending everything was fine. Then came the screech, a strange frequency, like stretched metal, like a soul crying out from inside the engine chamber. Damian's eyes slowly lifted from the screen, and for the first time since the flight began, they no longer held confidence, but confusion. The cabin air turned dense. A laptop flew from a passenger's lap, slammed into the seat back, and skidded across the floor. Thin smoke began to seep from the crevices of the engine compartment, pale blue smoke, odorless, yet signaling something far more dangerous: a destabilized pressure system. The pilot called for an emergency descent. Oxygen masks deployed with a piercing hiss, screams mixed with prayers. And Damian, the man who once shook global markets with a mere frown, could now only grip the armrest tightly. His eyes widened, not at the tilt of the plane, but because of an image flashing into his mind. The rain-soaked face of the woman from earlier, screaming about a pressure chamber and a leak. His heart pounded. For the first time in his life, Damian Roth understood what it meant to be warned by someone powerless and to ignore it. And now the cost of that dismissal was unraveling second by second, meter by meter in the skies above. The plane made an emergency landing at a secondary airport, skidding across the runway at terrifying speed, rear wheels screeching like metal being pushed beyond its threshold. One engine smoked violently. Flames burst briefly before being smothered by the emergency system. When the exit doors opened, there was no applause, no relieved cheers, only an eerie silence. And Damian's face, ashen shaken, as he stepped down the emergency stairs. He wasn't looking for the media, nor his advisors. He was searching for Evelyn. The next morning, before financial news outlets could even report the dip in Asian markets, every front page had already been overtaken by a blaring headline in red: Billionaire, Damian Roth's private jet nearly explodes mid-air. The woman fired. Yesterday was the only one who warned them. Within hours, the blurry footage of Evelyn being escorted off the runway went viral. Yesterday's mockery was now buried under thousands of furious comments. Why did no one listen to her? Shame on the aviation industry for letting a genius mop floors. This is exactly why we must start listening to the most overlooked voices. Meanwhile, inside the maintenance room at LuxPort, Evelyn quietly packed up her locker. No apology, no crowd. No one came to her except for a young technician face, smudged with oil, awkwardly standing at the door, clutching a tablet to his chest. "Ms. Evelyn," he stammered. "The new data log from the pressure chamber yesterday. It matched exactly what you said. Oscillation deviation 0.07 Hz. If they hadn't lowered altitude, the entire rear cabin could have—" He swallowed hard, unable to finish. Evelyn didn't look up. She just nodded as if it no longer mattered. But inside, waves of emotions surged. Not anger. Sorrow. Because once again, the truth was only heard when it nearly became a tragedy. And respect, as always, arrived only when lives nearly didn't. At the same time, in the headquarters of Roth Global, Damian Roth held no meetings and gave no statements. He simply stood in silence before the floor-to-ceiling glass wall, gazing down at the glittering city he once controlled with every breath. He remembered Evelyn's eyes that day, not angry, not arrogant, just deeply sincere. It wasn't a warning from someone seeking attention. It was a cry for help, from a heart that understood consequences. "Bring her to me," immediately Damian ordered. His assistant gulped. "But she's been fired, sir. And the industry blacklist." Damian turned around, and for the first time in years, there was a tremble in his voice. "Then burn the damn list." The news spread like wildfire. Media outlets scrambled to uncover Evelyn's past. And when they discovered she had once been a top student at a prestigious engineering institute, had even won awards for jet engine designs, but was forced to drop out to care for a mother dying of late-stage cancer, the world went silent. Evelyn was not just a janitor. She was the only one with a vision far enough to see what others couldn't, but was pushed into the shadows simply because she didn't carry a powerful last name or wear a designer dress. And now, after nearly losing everything, the world was finally ready to listen. The 24-carat gold-trimmed glass elevator glided slowly up to the 88th floor of the Roth Global Tower, a symbol of power, where people could shift stock prices with just a glance. Evelyn stood there in a plain white blouse and worn black trousers, utterly out of place among suits worth $10,000. But she did not bow her head. Not anymore. The office doors opened not with grandeur, but with the heavy silence of significance. Damian Roth stood with his back to her, one hand resting on a dark leather chair. Morning light casting over half his face, revealing eyes that were weary yet sharp like an eagle after a storm. In a room as silent as a cathedral, he spoke first. not with the authority he was known for, but in a voice low and sincere, as if each word had been carefully chosen. Evelyn. I was wrong. She said nothing. She didn't rush forward. She just looked at him, the man who had once been a distant dream to so many young engineers, a man who had placed all his faith in technology, never in people. That day, he continued, when you ran out onto the runway. I thought you were insane, but it was I who was blind. Damian turned to face her, now discarding protocol, shedding ego. I have a full team of engineers, and yet none of them saw what you saw. You had no power, no title, no backing, but you possessed what this entire industry lacks: courage and integrity. The air thickened. Evelyn took a breath, and for the first time spoke not softly, but with dignity. I didn't do it to be recognized. I did it because I couldn't bear to watch another accident unfold like the one that took my father. I was too late once. I won't be late again. In that moment, the entire room seemed to pause. Damian slowly nodded. I didn't ask you here to apologize, but to offer. He extended a folder, not a job application, but a contract. At the top, bold letters read, Director of Technology Development, Roth Aerospace. Evelyn froze. She looked at the contract, something she had once dreamed about, while scrubbing floors in the maintenance bay, never daring to believe she'd one day hold it in her hands. No one understands the limits and injustices of this system better than you, Damian said, his eyes now steady with resolve. I want to rebuild everything from the ground up. And I need someone who isn't afraid to say no, to shout across an airport if they have to. Evelyn stepped forward and placed her hand on the contract. But instead of signing it right away, she looked up, her voice calm and sharp as a scalpel. I accept. But I won't do this for you. I'll do it for every engineer out there who's been forgotten, for those judged by the uniforms they wear. Damian smiled for the first time, a genuine smile, free of strategy or calculation. He extended his hand. Evelyn shook it, not as a subordinate to a CEO, but as two people who had once stood on opposite ends of power, now looking in the same direction. And so, a new chapter began, not in quiet peace, but in the fire of change. In her first week as director, Evelyn didn't choose a bulletproof glass office or a polished ebony desk. She went straight to the testing lab, where the sounds of welding sparks and clashing metal drowned out all corporate pleasantries. The engineers who had been assigned to show the new boss around greeted her with detached politeness. But within just 1 hour, everything flipped. Evelyn didn't just read the blueprints, she corrected them. She didn't just understand the technology, she grasped the core principles down to the frequency of vibration. Word spread quickly. The new director once mopped floors, but now had senior engineers silently listening as she broke down the reverse vortex combustion chamber. They started calling her the ghost mechanic, the invisible engineer who once quietly saved a billionaire's life. But that was only the beginning. Evelyn didn't crave power. She influenced through quiet presence and razor-sharp observation. She reviewed every department piece by piece, and then the truth began to surface. Technical reports had been altered to conceal manufacturing flaws. Equipment contracts had inflated prices from covert kickbacks. Female engineers received biased performance reviews for daring to question superiors. Evelyn didn't expose them all at once. She summoned each person individually, no public reprimands, but enough for them to realize the old game was over. Some resigned voluntarily. Those who once looked down on her now avoided her gaze in the hallways. Then one day, she made her first official announcement to the entire senior staff of Roth Aerospace. Starting today, all internal evaluations will be conducted anonymously and at random. All technical proposals will be judged by merit, not by the name attached. And all reports will be verified by an independent team of engineers. No more immunity. The room fell dead silent. Some frowned. Some exchanged weary glances. But no one dared to oppose her openly, because everyone knew Evelyn wasn't trying to win favor. She was here to free the minds suffocated by bias and corruption. Simultaneously, Evelyn quietly partnered with small technical universities to launch the Rise from Shadows initiative, recruiting talent based not on background, but on real potential. Poor students, once rejected for lacking the right network, were now offered internships at Roth under Evelyn's direct mentorship. The media dubbed it a silent purge of soft power. No public firings, no grand exposés, yet within 3 months, nearly 40% of Roth Global's middle and upper management had changed. Evelyn didn't need to shout. She made the entire system learn to fear its own reflection. And in engineering circles, a quiet phrase began to echo. If you're brilliant, Evelyn will find you. If you're dishonest, Evelyn will find you. But one thing's certain, she won't let it slide. The unveiling of Roth Aerospace's newest aircraft took place at the Singapore AirTech Expo, a global gathering of brilliant minds, heavyweight investors, and the entire world's media. Spotlight beams blazed across the gleaming silver body of the Roth Horizon 1, a symbol of a new era in aviation. Damian Roth stepped onto the stage, but instead of delivering one of his trademark speeches, he said only a single sentence. "This plane is not our greatest achievement. Our greatest achievement is standing backstage." Every eye turned toward the rear curtain, and when Evelyn appeared, the entire room fell silent. No evening gown, no heels. She wore a charcoal engineer's jumpsuit, the collar subtly embroidered with Roth's new logo, a circle encased in 3 diagonal lines representing truth, fairness, innovation. Evelyn didn't bow. She walked forward as someone who had once belonged there, had once been stripped of that place, and was now returning to redefine it. A journalist stood up abruptly. "Ms. Evelyn, is it true? Were you the woman removed from LuxPort?" Evelyn smiled. "I was never removed from the industry. I was just placed where no one would hear me speak." She raised a simple object, a boarding pass made of titanium, engraved with the words, "For those who spoke up when it wasn't safe." She handed it to a young woman in the front row, a Nigerian student who had just won first prize in Roth's Global Clean Engine Design Competition. Evelyn said, "This pass isn't for boarding a plane. It's a pass into a world where you're allowed to speak up, to correct what's wrong, and to never be judged by the clothes you wear." The entire hall rose in applause. But it wasn't the kind of applause given to a hero after a victory. It was the kind of applause reserved for someone who changed the rules of the game. Have you ever thought that someone who mops floors could change the entire aviation industry? Evelyn Chase's story isn't just a tale of rising through adversity, it's proof that those who are most underestimated often carry the brightest light. The lesson here isn't about titles, degrees, or connections. It's about unwavering resolve, the courage to speak when no one's listening, and the kindness that stays intact even when every door has slammed shut. Personally, I believe the world doesn't need more successful people who rise just to shine. It needs successful people who rise to lift others up. If you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or looked down on, simply because you didn't belong to that elite world, remember Evelyn was once you. And she didn't change herself to fit the world. She made the world relearn how to see people. If this story moved you, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. And don't forget to hit subscribe to Toch Story, where every story is a spark and every viewer is part of something powerfully human.